Good morning, everyone. We'll go ahead and get started with our session today. My name is Ginger McBride, and I'm the chair of this year's KASFAA Outreach Training Committee. I'm joined by our presenters, Savannah Williams, who's a financial aid counselor at Southwestern College, and the co-chair of our outreach training committee, Sicilee Shannon, who's a financial aid counselor and VA school certifying official at Manhattan Tech. If you wind up having questions for our presenters during the session, feel free to put those in the chat. They may wind up addressing your question in one of the other slides, but if we get to the end and there are still any questions that haven't been addressed, or if you have questions that you'd like to ask at the end, I'll be moderating our chat this morning. So please make use of that feature, and we'll go until 11 a.m. this morning. Thank you so much for joining us. I'll turn it over to Savannah and Sicilee.
Good morning. This morning we are going to go into a deep dive of the upcoming 26-27 FAFSA. As you can see, we used a Back to the Future or Back to October theme because this year the FAFSA is going to open on October 1st, whereas the previous couple 8 years we struggled with getting that out on October 1st. And so the topics that we are looking to cover this morning are going to be just the overview of the 26-27 FAFSA, some changes that we can expect to see on the 26-27 application. We're going to talk about contributors, dependency status, how to create your account through studentaid.gov, as well as recover your account if you have one and don't know what those credentials are. We're going to walk you through filling out the 26-27 FAFSA. It's going to be more specific to dependent students and parents, but we will also touch on independent students. And then we're also going to talk about the next steps after you fill out that FAFSA application. So as we come into the overview, FAFSA stands for Free Application for Federal Student Aid. It is required to determine eligibility for federal, state, and some institutional aid. By that, we refer to grants such as Pell, SEOG, and state grants. Part of the FAFSA is also work study. There's student loans, both the subsidized and unsubsidized. And we've noticed in a lot of scholarship situations that it does require the FAFSA completion. A lot of those scholarships want like the SAI and some of the things that the FAFSA can help us determine. As we can see here, the FAFSA is going to open on October 1st for the 26-27 aid year. Again, previous aid years, it should have opened on October 1st and did not make that, but this year we are projected to follow that timeline. The application is something that does need to be done every academic year. And it does use the prior tax information. So for 26-27, the FAFSA is going to go off of the 2024 tax information. And then it does require input from all contributors, so the student, parents, and then spouse as applicable. Continuing on with the overview, the FAFSA is completed electronically at studentaid.gov, and many schools do have deadlines or priority dates. They do vary by school. As an example, Washburn's is March 1st, 2026. Some schools are right around that time frame. Some schools maybe a little earlier, a little later. It's always important to just kind of reach out to a school if a student is interested to make sure that you're getting that submitted on time. These are some of the changes that we can expect on the 26-27 FAFSA. So from studentaid.gov with account creation for the 24, 25, and 25, 26 aid years, when you went in to create a new account, there was anywhere from a 1 to 3 business day waiting period to verify that account. The 26-27 FAFSA is now going to change. They are telling us that there's going to be real-time verification through the Social Security Administration. So as soon as you create an account, you should be able to verify and log in and start filling out that FAFSA right away. There are going to be some asset changes on the 26-27 FAFSA in terms of exclusions from asset reporting. So net worth of family-owned businesses with 100 or fewer full-time employees, net worth of a farm on which the family resides, and then net worth of a family-owned commercial fishing business. Again, those are all going to be excluded. Also, this year on the 26-27 FAFSA, they did change the contributor invite. It is now an email-based invitation. Students, when they're filling out their FAFSA, will send the invite to their parent or spouse, if applicable, by simply entering the email address of that parent or spouse. That person is then going to receive an invitation code via their email. And so the contributor will then log in using that non-case sensitive code to access the form and link their information to the student's application. And then again, instant verification. So new and existing accounts are going to undergo that real-time Social Security verification. And so they should be able to log in right away and start the process rather than having to wait that 1 to 3 business days with previous 8 years. So on the FAFSA, every person is going to be a contributor. And so a FAFSA contributor essentially is anyone required to provide information on a student's FAFSA. So again, the student, the parent, spouse, if applicable. The role, contributors are going to provide personal and financial information needed to determine federal student aid eligibility. Each contributor must create an FSA ID to securely log in and complete their section of the FAFSA. So this is referring to the student. If a parent needs access, again, it's going to be a parent. And then if there's a spouse that needs access, the spouse is also going to have their own FSA ID. The responsibility is that the contributors only see and complete their own portion. Their information is kept private from the other contributors. As we've learned, there's a lot of parents that don't necessarily like their students having their information. And so this allows that parent to enter their information privately and their student not see that. Who is a contributor? So again, the student is always going to be a contributor. If the student is married, possibly their spouse, the biological or adopted parents of a dependent student, and then the step parent. So if a parent is remarried and lives with the student's parent, then the step parent would be a contributor. All students are considered dependent unless one of these pertain. And so 24 years or older by January 1st of the school year. A student is going to be considered dependent unless they are married at the time they are completing the FAFSA. They will be dependent unless they are a graduate or professional student, meaning that they're working on some type of master's or doctoral program. If the student is a veteran or currently serving on active duty in the U.S. Armed Forces, they would be considered dependent otherwise. If the student has dependents, children or others who receive more than half of their support from the students, they would otherwise be dependent. Orphans, wards of the court, foster care, or legal guardianship students after the age of 13, emancipated minors or individuals that are in a legal guardianship as determined by the court, and then any students who are homeless or self-supporting and at risk of homelessness as determined by a school district or shelter director. So again, unless they meet one of these criteria, the student would be considered dependent. Sometimes they have additional questions on these, and so it's always important just to have them reach out to the school if they do have questions as to whether or not they would fall under one of these categories. We're going to walk through the process of how to create an account. And so all accounts are created through studentaid.gov. It is going to be what we call your FSA ID. FSA stands for Federal Student Aid. And so as we come into the account creation process, accounts are going to require an email address that can be verified. We do recommend that students use their personal email. We encourage them to do so because oftentimes they're going to possibly leave the school that they initially create that account with and may not necessarily have access, whereas they're always going to have access to their personal email address. So again, personal email address is encouraged and recommended. But to start, students are going to go to studentaid.gov. When they open their browser and they visit the studentaid.gov website, in the top right-hand corner, there are some options to log in and create an account. They're going to click on Create Account. There's 7 steps that the student is then going to move through to verify their account, enter all of their personal information, and set the FSA ID up. The first step is going to entail them providing their personal information. It's going to be their full legal name. They're going to want to make sure that the legal name they enter is the name that also matches their Social Security card. So, for example, if we have a married student who has changed their name but not yet changed it on the social, it's going to be important to utilize the name that's on the social and not their married name. They're going to provide their Social Security number and date of birth. For some parents or for some individuals, they do not have a social. There is a box that they can check to indicate that they don't have a Social Security number. We will touch on that a few slides from now. And as you can see from the screenshots, it is right here as well. They're going to enter their email address and their phone number under that personal information slide. And so in step 2, this is where they're going to set up their login details. They're going to create their username and strong password. They're going to walk through choosing security questions for account recovery. And again, they're also going to confirm information such as their email and phone number. When creating the user ID, the FSA system will tell the student or the parent or whoever whether or not that username is available. If the username they enter is not available because somebody else is using that, the student will have to plan to come up with something different. Continuing on with the account creation process, step 3 is going to be providing contact information. So this is where the student is going to enter their mailing address. A mailing address is required for students even if they don't have a Social Security number. They'll again also enter and confirm mobile phone number. If they don't have a US mobile phone number, this field can be left blank. Step 4 is going to be the communication preferences. So students going to select their required and optional communication preferences. Oftentimes it's going to allow them to select between text and email. And then it's also going to allow them to select their language preference. They'll then navigate into step 5, which is choosing their 4 security questions. They'll have a bunch of different questions that they can click on. They'll select one that they want to answer. And so they'll enter that answer in the little box. And this is to help recover their account at a later time if needed. And then coming into step 6, they're going to enable 2-step verification. So they're going to double check their personal and account information. And then in step 7, this is where they actually enable that 2-step verification. So they're going to have to click to send a code to their email. And then once they receive that code, they'll enter that into the box. And then it's going to be the same situation with their phone number. The system's going to text them a code. They'll then have to enter that. It is also going to give the student the option to use an authenticator app. The authenticator app is optional, it's not required, and it is not reliant on the internet. So if a student is in an area where there's not a lot of internet, this may be a great option for them. And there is an option to look at what authenticator apps are available. The system can help give recommendations to set that up. From there, the student is going to agree and submit. And so they're just going to review their details. They're going to agree to the terms and conditions and then submit their application. As long as everything is successful, they're going to receive a notification that says they're confirmed and then their FSA ID is ready to use. And then just a reminder, each contributor must create their own account or have their own FSA ID. So again, this is going to be the student, the parent, and spouse if applicable. When you are creating your account, for some parents or for some individuals, we know that they do not have a Social Security number. So this is going to be specifically meant for those who don't have a social. If you do not have a social and are not an eligible non-citizen, you should not file the FAFSA. But again, if you don't have a Social Security, you would want to check that box. That's going to be on the very first step of steps 1 through 7. You're going to answer a series of knowledge-based identity questions to confirm your identity. And then as long as the user passes that process, they're going to be able to move through the process of creating their account and again, being able to use that immediately. There is an account recovery process. As you can see on the screen, it can take about 15 minutes. The account recovery process is specific to individuals who have changed their email, changed their phone number, are unable to answer their security questions, and ultimately be able to log back into their FSA ID. It's going to walk you through 5 different steps. In some cases, there is a chat option that you can utilize if you need help with these steps. But step one, you're going to submit the request. In step two, there's going to be a message that's sent to you with a document upload link. You'll utilize that link to upload documents such as your photo ID or your passport to verify your identity. You'll receive emails with reset links for resetting your password. And then from there, students can create a new password to log in. They should be able to look up their FSA ID. That usually is not reset. From here, we're going to walk you through the dependent student filling out the FAFSA application, and I am going to hand it over to Savannah so she can walk you through that.
Alrighty, good morning, everybody. Like Sicily said, we're going to go through some of the dependents, well, not some of them, all of the dependent student questions that are on the FAFSA. So to start, next slide, please, Sicily. Alrighty, so very first to start is just going to have the student verify all their information. It's very critical that they make sure that their birthday and their social security number are correct. I know that there are a few students who have made it through without getting their birthday correct in our system, but we're hopeful this year with the new update that won't happen. But just make sure when students are creating their account that they either have their social security card with them or get a picture of it or however they need to do so. Alrighty, so it's going to ask their state of residence. It seems like most of the time students are born in the state that they reside in, but if not, just make sure they put the date and the year that they moved to that state. They'll just want to be sure to, get an estimated time. They don't have to be exact. Alrighty, so this is where they go through and provide consent and approval. This page will inform the student about the consent and approval process and about how they pull over the federal tax information. Once they provide consent and approval, they will transfer that information directly from the IRS to the FAFSA form. So it'll just help them create their finances section. Just a little bit more about the consent and approval section. It just kind of gives them some statements to read and go over, just make sure they understand, what they're consenting to and what they're signing. It just kind of is their way of making sure that they understand the form completely. Alrighty, so when they do give consent to pull the information over from the IRS, it does show them a little bit of information. It doesn't really give them information about their tax information, but it just shows them if it was complete or not. So if it wasn't complete, it'll give them a message saying we weren't able to fully pull it over successfully, and then it'll ask them some questions manually. Which I kind of just went over that. So this basically says that, sorry, we couldn't retrieve your data. Please select continue to proceed. So that's when they'll go through, answer any questions about their finances that they, if they worked or had any wages, they'll just enter it in there. Alrighty, so this is going to go over their personal circumstances. It'll just kind of give them a little bit of a brief statement about what they're getting ready to do, and then they'll be able to continue on with the form. Alrighty, so this is going to go over their marital status. For high school students, they are just going to select the single option and move forward. But say they fill it out after October, later into the summer, and they happen to get married, they'll just be able to select that married option. It'll ask them their, when they got married, and then a couple additional questions, and they'll move forward. But in this case, they're just going to use the single option, and then it just gives more just dependent information. Alrighty, so now it's going to go through and ask them about their college, like if they completed any college, and then what their plan is. So it's going to be asking them what their grade level is for the 26-27 year. A lot of times students will answer it for what they're doing currently. So we'll just want to be sure to have them read those questions fully and be sure that they select that they're going to be a first-year freshman, or if they've taken concurrent classes and have enough credits to be a sophomore, they could definitely choose that option as well. And then it also does ask if they've had a first bachelor's degree. This one can be a little confusing for students because sometimes they just don't read the question fully, so they just want to be sure to select that. No, they don't already have a first bachelor's degree, just to be sure they're eligible for all the aid that they can get. Alrighty, so these personal circumstances questions are asked to every student. So they'll just want to be sure they go through and make sure that they select the options that do apply to them. Some examples of them are as if they, are a veteran of the U.S. Armed Forces, or if they are a ward of the court, or if they have been adopted or in foster care. Now, those are just some examples. They just want to be sure to go through those and read them fully. Alrighty, so there are questions about homelessness or risk of homelessness. So it's going to ask them if they are at on or after July, if they were an unaccompanied homeless youth, or if they were self-supporting and at risk of being homeless. If they have any questions about that, it's always nice to click on the little I next to the question to kind of give some examples. But in this case, we're going to select the no option. Okay, so this is some questions about unusual circumstances. So this kind of helps students be prevented from being asked about parents. So if they were either left home due to an abusive or threatening environment, or abandoned, or are estranged from their parents, if they are a refugee or an asylee, a victim of human trafficking, any of those situations, they want to be sure to select that no option so they can bypass all that parent information. It just kind of makes their form a lot simpler. Alrighty, so based on the answers provided by the student is considered an a dependent student. The student is asked if the financial aid administrator should determine their eligibility for a direct unsubsidized loan only. This option is if the student's parents are not willing to provide information. So if the student selects no, uh, it'll just have them go through with the parent information. But if they select yes, it'll kind of give a little message about they won't be eligible for all of their potential federal student aid. So this is just explaining that they're getting to go through the student demographic section. This gives a little overview. Alrighty, so first it's just going to ask what their sex is. It looks like for this example, it's going to go with student as a male. Alrighty, so the race and ethnicity questions, the student is asked to identify their race if they select the checkboxes that apply. And then after they make a selection, there will be a second drop down that will allow them to select any other options that might apply to them. Some students have more than one option to select, so they'll be able to select as many as necessary. All right, the student is then asked about their citizenship status. So if your student is a U.S. citizen or a national, they will just select that option. If they are either of the other options, just be sure that they, still go through the questions. It'll ask them additional questions other than just being as a U.S. citizen. Okay, so now the student will be asked about their parents' education status. The student selects neither parent attending college option for this, but if your student knows that their parent for sure went to college, they'll definitely select that option. Alrighty, so now the student is asked if their parent was killed in the line of duty. So if their parent or guardian was killed in the line of duty while serving on active duty as a member of the U.S. Armed Forces on or after 9/11, or are performing official duties as a public safety officer, they will select that yes option. Okie dokie. So now they're going to go through and select what their high school completion status is. So in this case, these students should have their high school diploma, not at the time they're filling it out, but by the time they get to college. So they'll just go ahead and select that high school diploma option, unless they've gotten a GED or something like that. Alrighty, so now it'll ask them where their high school is, what their state is, and what their city is, so they can search for it and find their exact school. Alrighty, so this student has the option to edit the high school information if they input it incorrectly. So the student confirms the high school information by selecting continue to go to the next part of the section. Alrighty, so this is kind of where it goes into the actual finances section. It'll provide an overview first, and then it'll allow them to keep continuing forward so it can ask them a little bit more questions. So it's going to ask them if they did file a 1040 or a 1040 in our tax return. So if your student, works a decent wage and files their own taxes on their own, they'll just go ahead and select yes. And then if not, they'll just put no. Okay, so then they're asked about what their tax filing status is. Most students in this case will be single, but we'll just want to make sure to enter the dollar amounts for the other required responses below. Alrighty, so this is a little bit more of the tax return information it's going to ask. So it's going to ask about their taxes, income, and other financial information. So kind of starts with any questions about pensions and IRA distributions, and then asks other questions about their adjusted gross income, any income tax that they paid, and then also asks questions about income earned credit, and then if they owned a business or if they had any losses or profits from those businesses. There are some questions about foreign earned income. So if your students' parents do, or if your students have any of those, they'll just want to be sure to enter that information to confirm that, because it doesn't pull over from the tax return. Alrighty, so this is some asset questions for the student. They'll want to make sure they enter a response in each field, even if it's 0. So if they don't have any assets, they can just enter 0, but they can't leave the number blank. Okay, so this is where the student will go through and select some colleges. This will kind of give an overview of that, but the next slide will show how the students can go through and select the ones that they're interested in. So it'll ask them to search by their state, or they can enter the school code if they have it. When we go to FAFSA nights for high school students, we usually just provide the number for them so they can enter it. There are a couple Southwestern colleges in the United States, not in Kansas, but it's easy to go through the form really fast and just put in the wrong thing when you're looking. So if you go to a FAFSA night or have students go to a FAFSA night where they can get the number from their institution that they're interested in going to, and that's definitely something that could help them. Alrighty, so after they select that search option when they're searching for the state, it gives them a list to choose from. They can send up to 20, they can select up to 20 schools to send their FAFSA information to. So they have to at least select one for the form to go through, but if they think of some more later, they can always add it after the fact. Alrighty, so after the student selects the correct schools from the search results, they'll be able to review those schools before continuing, just in case they selected one that they didn't mean to. If they haven't selected 20 schools, it'll still give them the option to add more, but it'll also let them put them in a different order if they would like to also. Alrighty, so this is going to go through some information about how the student invites their contributor. So the first page just is the last of, oh, it says this is the last of the student section. So we'll just give an overview of the section, and then it will just show that the contributor is required to provide, provide information to the FAFSA form for the dependent student. Alrighty, so the student is asked to enter their parent's email address to invite them to the FAFSA form. After entering the email address, the student selects send an invite. So then another pop-up window will appear so they can confirm the email address. Like Cicely said, they did require more information in the past. It was name, birthday, social, all that good stuff. But now it's just an email to make it simpler for the students, just so there's no errors in information. Alrighty, after they send the invite, this will confirm that the student's parent will receive an email, to get the invitation to the form. If they want to, they can go through the invitation email, or the student can copy that link that's on the screen provided and send that to the parent directly, and they can access it either way. Alrighty, so then the review page displayed will show all the responses that the student gave for the FAFSA form. They'll want to be sure to just review those responses by selecting expand all, or they can expand each section individually. And if they need to edit a response, they will just click on the questions hyperlink to be taken to that page, and they'll be able to just edit the information. Alrighty, so this is where the student will go through the signature. They'll just want to make sure they review the terms and conditions of the FAFSA form, and then what they agree to when they sign the form. It kind of gives them all those bullet points to read through, just making sure they understand everything thoroughly. Alrighty, so this is a little bit more information about the signature. After agreeing to the terms and conditions of the FAFSA form and digitally signing, the student will be able to submit their sections of the form. Since the parent permission has not been provided, the FAFSA form is not all the way complete yet and can't be processed, but it's one step closer. Alrighty, so once they have agreed and signed, they'll get their little submission page. It says pending submission. It'll remind them that it's not complete until their parent has completed their contributor part of the form. So it'll just kind of give them some next steps and include their tracking and managing information. So it kind of shows them where they're at and what they're waiting for. Alrighty, so this is just a little bit of a continuation from the student's completion page from their FAFSA, or their pending completion page from the FAFSA. It just explains some information about their next steps, about checking their email, and just confirming again that this is not complete until the contributor has completed their part of the form. So just want to make sure that they get with their parent and have them complete it and sign it so they can get it all completed. All right, so this is for the parent invites for the dependent student, and Cicely is going to go ahead and walk us through that.
All right, so if we have a dependent student, they do have to send their parent an invite. As we know from the beginning, the purpose of the parent invite is so that the parent can fill out their section privately without the student seeing that information. So this next step is just going to walk us through what the parent is going to see, how to process that process that invite or get that code so the parent can move forward. And so the first step, as we can see, is parent email. This is not a view within studentaid.gov or the FAFSA. This essentially is just to demonstrate what a parent is going to see when they open that invitation that the student has sent them. And as you can see from this screen, this is an example of Alex's email to his parent. This is what the parent's going to see. And so the parent would have to select accept invitation. They are then going to be taken to studentaid.gov. There is also a code that is going to come with that. That code is going to be important. That parent's going to need to enter that code to be able to move forward. And so from here, when the parent is taken to studentaid.gov, hopefully they have already created their FSA ID. If not, then the parent can go in and certainly walk through those 7 steps that we discussed in the very beginning to create their their FSA ID. And then they would come back to the actual login of studentaid.gov, enter the ID, enter their password, so they can then access the actual FAFSA. After logging in, they are going to utilize that invitation code. So this is where they're going to need that. They're going to accept the 2627 FAFSA invitation. And then once they enter that code to accept, they're going to submit. If there's questions, you can see down below that they can see what's next if they didn't receive an invitation code, in which case it's going to be speaking with their student or whoever sent that code to ensure that they entered the correct email address or that something wasn't wrong in that process of sending it. And then it's also going to give them the option to accept for a different invitation year. When we go into the 26-27 FAFSA, students are still able to submit for the 25-26 FAFSA because we'll be going into spring. And so it'll be important because we're working with two different aid years. And so if they're looking for a different aid year, then they'll have the option to go into their activity through their federal student aid account and access 25-26 instead of the upcoming 26-27 aid year. And so once the parent accepts the invitation code, again, they're going to click submit. It is going to give the parent a pop-up window. It's going to basically just give them their student's name so they can ensure that, yes, they are in fact accepting on behalf of the correct student. It is also going to let the parent know that some of their personal information is going to be required and necessary in processing and completing those steps to fill out the FAFSA application. The parent would need to select accept to agree to share their information and be able to enter the FAFSA successfully. So on this section, the parent is going to confirm their identity. So this first page within the parent section, the parent can verify that their personal information is correct. If there is anything that does need to be updated, the parent will have to go back into their studentaid.gov account under their settings and actually change that information. If there's ever any questions with that, certainly have your student reach out to someone at the school or one of the back to school nights, and we can certainly navigate them through that. But again, information is changed directly through studentaid.gov and not the FAFSA itself. And so as a continuation of the first page, the parent is going to verify their mailing address on this next page. To update this information again, they would have to go back into studentaid.gov under their settings and update that address under their settings. This next page is going to be the parent's consent and approval. Essentially, every person who fills out the FAFSA does have to go through this same consent and approval process. And so it's going to pop up the summary. It's going to pop up like the terms and conditions. Once the parent provides the consent and approval, their federal tax information is going to be transferred directly into the IRS through the FADDX. Again, it's going to help them complete the finances section when they come to that. On these next pages, as you can see, it's just going to be a continuation of what the consent and approval is going to look like. If the parent has any questions, they are going to be able to pop up those FAQs and select the drop downs essentially, and just kind of get some additional information or answers as to what happens after they provide their consent and approval, what happens if they decline. It's going to give them information on who should provide consent and approval. And then if the student is married and didn't file a joint return with their current spouse, it's going to give them some additional information on that. And so those drop downs are going to be helpful. When the parent is ready, they are going to select approve to then be taken to the next page of the process. And when they click approve, because they have approved now or consented and approved to use that FADDX, the FAFSA is going to attempt to connect to the IRS and import their tax information. This is what they're going to see. It does take a couple of minutes to process sometimes. Usually they'll get a little pop-up that says this could take a few minutes. But once they get this, hopefully it's successful. they are then going to be able to complete the finances section for them a little easier. If for some reason the FADDX was not successful in importing the information from the IRS into the FAFSA, the parent is going to be notified. It is going to let them know that the data could not be retrieved. At this point, they can hit the previous and try it again. Most likely they would get the same error message. So from here, we would recommend just selecting continue. If they continue, however, the process is going to be a little more manual. The parent is most likely going to want their 2024 tax return in front of them to help answer some of the questions that they're going to have to answer in regards to their finances. And then once the student goes past all of that information, it's going to come into the parent demographics. This is just an overview of what that looks like in preparing the parent for, we're going to ask you some questions about you and your family. And again, its purpose is to help them determine the federal student aid that the student is going to be eligible to receive. And so from here, the parent would essentially just select continue. The parent is then going to be asked about their current marital status, just like the student. And so the parent is just going to want to kind of review the options and select what is best for them. If the parent has never been married and is single, that's the option they would select. In some cases, we have parents who are unmarried, but they both live in the same house and they work together. So they would select that. If the parents are married and not separated, as you can see in this option, that's what they would select. They can also select from the others, such as separated, divorced, and widowed. And then there's also the option of remarried, and that's where step parent information would come in. And so again, the parent is going to select the option that pertains to them, and they're going to select continue. It's going to then ask the parent about their state of residence. It does not have to be the same state of residence as the student. It can be, but it's not a requirement. And so the parent essentially is going to select their option or their choice. It is also going to ask them
Hi,
the month
Kaden,
and
how are
year.
you?
Good.
All right.
Sorry about that. So from this section, it is also going to ask the parent the month and the year that they became a resident of that state. And again, just as a reminder, the parent and the student can have two different states of residency. But as you can see, once they've made their choice and they've entered that month and year, they're just going to select continue to move on to that next slide. And so in that next slide, this is where it's going to come a little more nitty gritty into the parent's finances. So as you can see, this is just an overview of what the parent is going to see. It's going to tell them we're getting ready to enter into some finance information. And again, the purpose is to help determine the student's eligibility for federal student aid. And then they are going to ask about financial information in this section. And so parent, again, would hit continue to move on to that next slide. It's going to ask the parent about federal benefits. So as you can see, some of the examples are earned income credit, federal housing. Did the parent receive Medicaid? Is the parent on SSI? Did they receive anything like WIC or SNAP? If there's none, then we would mark none of these apply. The student can mark as many options, or excuse me, the parent can mark as many options as necessary. So in some cases, we've had parents who will mark 4 of these options. And in some cases, some parents just mark 1. And then it may be the case again where they just mark none apply. And so once they're done with this, as you can see, they'll again just select continue to move on to that next slide. This is going to ask the parent about their tax filing status. So this page is going to ask if the parent did file a 2024 1040. And then if they did file a 1040 and they did indicate married or remarried or indicate some sort of partnership, it's also going to ask if the parent filed a 2024 joint tax return with their current spouse. If the parent marked single, if the parent marked divorced or widowed, you won't necessarily see this second question because obviously they don't have a spouse to answer. And so once they mark this information, again, they're going to select continue to move to the next slide. It's then going to ask the parent about family size. The parent has the option on this slide to enter the number of children or other dependents who live with the parents. Those dependents will also receive more than half of their support from July 1st, 2026 and June 30th, 2027. If you look at the example here, it will add everything up for you. And so in this case, we have a parent. The parent happens to have a spouse or partner, and then there's the student. We can see that the parent indicated 2 additional dependents, so the number is 5. If this number were to be different, the parent would just indicate this number. If there were no additional dependents, this is going to require a number, so the parent would essentially enter 0 here. And then again, they're going to continue to go into that next slide. So on this page, it's going to ask about the number in college. So the parent is going to be asked how many people will be in college in the family between July 1st, 2026 and June 30th, 2027. Again, they do have to enter a response into the entry field. So as from the previous example, we know we have 5 in the household. This parent has said that there's only 1 in college. If there were 0 in college, there would be 0. If the parent has other children in college that are dependents, they would need to indicate that I have this student and this student, and so that number could potentially change. And then again, the parent would hit continue to move into the next part of that FAFSA. So moving on with the parent tax return information, they're then going to be asked some more specific questions about their 2024 tax return. They're going to have to enter a response essentially in each field. And again, if there's nothing to report, they would have to enter 0. So on this page, again, it's going to ask about the filing status. And so if the parent filed head of household, married filing separately, whatever that looked like for them in 2024 is what it's going to essentially be selected here. They're going to be asked about their income from work, their tax exempt income interest, interest income. They're going to be asked about education credits. They're going to be asked about schedules. On the schedules, hopefully the parent will have their 2024 tax return in front of them and they can kind of take a look at that tax return to best answer this, but don't know is an option. So if they're uncertain, they can certainly select don't know. If they filed any of these schedules, they would certainly want to mark yes. Otherwise, they can mark no if they did not file. And then, of course, it's going to ask questions about net profit or loss. We've got amount of college grants, scholarships, and AmeriCorps benefits. And then again, any foreign earned income exclusions. Again, if these are 0, they don't want to leave them blank. They would want to make sure that they put a 0 in there. Once they filled out all of these fields, same thing, they're going to hit continue to move on to the next part of that FAFSA. From there, it is going to ask the parent about their assets. The parent is, again, going to have to enter a response into each field. And so if the entry is 0, then the parents would need to manually enter that 0. But it is going to ask on this slide about the child support that's received annually. And then it's going to ask questions specific to the parent's assets. So the total of their cash, savings, or checking accounts. It's going to ask the parent about their net worth of investments, including real estate. And then it's also going to ask about their net worth of farms and businesses. Again, this parent has said they don't have any, so they entered 0s. And then again, they're going to continue to move on to the next part of that FAFSA. This is going to be some other parent information that could possibly pop up. The parent is going to be asked to provide information about their spouse or their partner if they indicated that they were married, remarried, or in a situation where they're not married but living together. And so it's going to ask about who that person is. Based on their responses, they're going to need to know about their spouse's date of birth. And so from here, they would want to enter that date of birth and then select continue to move on to the next part of the FAFSA. There is going to be a review page for the parent. And so it's going to essentially display the responses that the parent has provided so far on their FAFSA form. In this section, the parent can only view the responses of each section that they've entered. They can view all of the responses by selecting expand all, or there's a drop down next to each section. If they want to just visit a few sections, they can just click on that drop down to verify everything. If they want to edit a response, they will have to select the question's hyperlink to be taken back to that corresponding page to make sure that they re-enter the correct information. And then they can always come back to this page just to kind of reconfirm that what they entered again is correct. And as you can see, they can come down and hit continue to then come into the signature section. So every person, whether it's the parent, the student, or the spouse, does have to sign the FAFSA form to be able to submit it successfully. And so on this page, the parent is going to acknowledge the terms and conditions of the FAFSA form. This is where they are also going to digitally sign their section of the form. Since all required sections are complete, the parent can both sign and submit the student's FAFSA from here. And so they're just going to want to read through the summary, read through the information on this page. And then much like the student did down at the bottom, it's going to give them that little box that they're going to check. Once they check that, they'll continue and submit the FAFSA, and then the FAFSA is going to submit. The parent is then going to receive their confirmation, letting them know that the FAFSA form is completed. And so they are then presented this abbreviated confirmation page. It does display the information to the parent about tracking the student's FAFSA forms, as well as some of the next steps of the process. The student is also from this point going to receive an email with full detailed confirmation. And so the student and parent sections completed, both signed. The FAFSA form is now being considered complete and everything has been submitted successfully for processing. And so this is going to come into some additional information about FAQs for accounts. From here, I'm going to turn it back over to Savannah, and she will walk us through the remainder of the PowerPoint.
Alrighty, so some of the frequently asked questions, a lot have to do with creating accounts. So first one is, do I need to create a new account if I already have an account? No. You can only actually have one account. So you'll want to be sure to gain access to the account that you already have created. Like we kind of went through, you can select that you forgot your information. It'll walk you through the process of, you can either use your phone number or your email to get all that stuff recovered. I'm going to ask, when should I create my account? As soon as possible. Now that we don't have to wait the 1 to 3 business days to have the accounts verified, the students can complete their account and even do the application on the same day. What if a contributor is having issues setting up a studentaid.gov account? They would want to, well, there could be several reasons why they're having issues setting up their account. If they're running into issues, they'll want to contact Federal Student Aid for assistance. The nice thing about Federal Student Aid is they have a little chat bot on their screen. So if you ever feel like using that little chat bot, it can be pretty helpful. Sometimes you do still have to call them, but it doesn't hurt to try. And then, can someone else create my account for me? No, it's important that only the account owner has control of their username and password, since this information has information about their IRS stuff. So they'll just want to be sure that they are the ones creating the account. I know that parents sometimes like to do that for students, but just something to help students learn to become a little bit more independent as they start taking on this new journey. So, and then, can I share my info with others? Kind of like I said, no. Keep all your information private. It's confidential, and you just don't want everybody having access to it. Like I said, it's easy to give it to somebody so they can help you out, but it's just best if you kind of take the time to do it yourself. That way you understand it and you know a little bit more about it. All right, so we're going to go through some information about some next steps. All right, so once it's been signed and submitted, they'll get their FAFSA submission summary. The eligibility overview, it just outlines the estimates of aid the student and their SAI, which is their student aid index. It kind of gives an outline of their answers and what the contributor provided. They can start a correction once the FAFSA has been processed, like if they entered any information incorrectly. If a student wants to review and compare the colleges that they selected, they can definitely look at those. And then some next steps about what they need to do next, or if they need to submit documentation to schools if they need anything else. Alrighty, so after the FAFSA is submitted, it takes about 1 to 3 days to be sent to the schools. I know sometimes when it's high processing times, it can take a little bit longer than that, but that's the normal processing time. That will just be sure to complete their financial aid file. Like I said, if their school's reaching out to them about additional documents that they need to submit, they just want to be sure to do that in a timely manner. This will kind of get them in line to get their financial aid offer. A lot of schools have a timeline where they like to send out their financial aid offer. So just getting your aid completed, you know, October is the best way to go. This is for private schools, public schools, community colleges, and technical colleges. And then, like I said, the school will notify you of next steps, usually through email, but through mail and through their whatever portal they have is another option. Alrighty, so verification. They do randomly select students for verification, which is a process to confirm that information on the FAFSA is accurate. That can require students and their parents to submit documents like tax returns or, copies of IDs and stuff like that. On the FAFSA submission summary, it will indicate if a student is selected for verification. It'll have a little asterisk next to the SAI, and it will have a comment in the application status section. So if they see that they've been selected and they want to reach out to their college and be proactive, that's not a bad thing. But a lot of times, schools will be, on it, get a hold of the students as soon as possible. Alrighty, so some more information about special circumstances. There's situations where parents have loss of income due to job loss or, reduction in wages. If there was a separation or a divorce or a death of a parent, medical or dental expenses that are excessively high, or siblings or dependents or parents enrolled into colleges. So these students that are experiencing these issues could reach out to their financial aid office and see what process they can go through to see about getting a special circumstance put into place. All right, and then there's also unusual circumstances. Some examples of those are if you or your parent are incarcerated, if you have left home due to an abusive or threatening environment, you have been abandoned or estranged from your parents and have not been adopted, you were granted refugee or asylee status and are separated from your parents, or your parents are displaced in a foreign country, you are a victim of human trafficking, or otherwise unable to contact or locate your parents and have not been adopted. If your circumstances result in you not having a safe, stable place to live, you may be considered homeless youth. So students with any situation like this or similar experience should, reach out to their financial aid office and discuss the process of how they can go through getting, an unusual circumstance, can help them get more financial aid. Some future dates to look forward to. There's going to be a few more virtual training nights in our not nights days in our series. So we're going to go over scholarships, and that's on November 4th. We're going to go over financial aid offers and the cost of college on February 3rd, and then professional judgment and special circumstance deep dive. Just give a little bit more information about those we just went over on March 3rd. Now, those are all from 9:30 a.m. to 11 a.m. Alrighty, and then just go over some common issues that we've noticed from students and their contributors. The unsubsidized loan question was a little bit more confusing previously. Now they've kind of fixed it by making the option go to no. You have to select yes to get it to do that. But anyways, if they select that option, it'll only give them an unsubsidized loan, which we will follow up on students with that. But they'll just want to be sure to read that thoroughly and just make sure that they're selecting the correct option. And then the high school completion status, like I said earlier, a lot of students get a little confused about the time frame since they're filling it out for next year. They'll just want to be sure to select that they have completed and got their high school diploma. The first bachelor's degree question, same as before. A lot of students just get a little bit confused because they're just in a hurry to get it finished. They want to be sure to select the option that fits them best. And then student circumstances, legal guardianship. It's just kind of a tricky question, but a lot of the students who have those circumstances will know if that applies to them. And then the paper FAFSA, we try to tell students to avoid that. It just takes a little bit longer to process, and they just don't get the results as easily and in their hands right in that moment. So if they are able to do it online, we just really encourage students to do it that way. And then just to reiterate, students should create their own accounts, and contributors should create their own accounts and keep their information private and secure.
Savannah, if I can add one thing real quick. Um,
Mhm.
the biggest issue that I think students run into with the legal guardianship in the student circumstances question is it has to be legal guardianship as determined by a court in their state of residence. And so often, especially in the state of Kansas, students may have someone other than a parent who has custodial guardianship, or there may be forms that the student's family has filled out with the school, making another adult essentially able to act as a guardian for that student at school or at a doctor's office, but they cannot answer yes to the legal guardianship question in the student circumstances section unless that guardianship determination has been made by a court of law. And unfortunately, like that's something that students are still working on, like in August and September because of confusion when they filled it out. Maybe it was back in February, but just over the summer of us reaching out and getting more information, they're realizing, oh, I'm not actually independent based on the student's circumstance and having to go through the unusual circumstances section. So if the folks who are at your high schools helping students file the FAFSA, if you can help them catch that on the front end by really either making a note of what I'm saying, or the Federal Student Aid website has that broken down, and it's also, I think, one of the information indicators in the student circumstance question. So just something that it sounds really similar as far as custodial guardianship and legal guardianship, or someone who's a guardian for school or doctor's offices, but it's a very different outcome for the FAFSA. Thanks for letting me interrupt.
Yeah, thank you for that, Ginger.
Um,
Appreciate it.
Also, to piggyback off of that, I apologize, Savannah. It is important to note too that the age of that legal guardianship is 13. There are some small leniencies, I guess, that kind of can go around that depending on like the circumstances. But for example, we've had a couple students this year with our school submit documentation, but they were in that legal guardianship status as of age 11, and it doesn't qualify. That legal guardian would become their parent or that adopted parent on the FAFSA. There's always those little eyes on the FAFSA. If you ever have questions too, you can certainly as you're navigating your student through, click on those to get some additional information. But 13 is that age. And so if something happened prior to 13, it's important to collect more information to be sure that that status is going to pertain because we do check those dates and we do check those ages as required when the students come in and submit that documentation to us.
Thank you so much, guys. Appreciate it. Helps a lot. Alrighty, so just some virtual FAFSA help. These are nights. We're gonna have FAFSA nights from 5 to 7:30. So Thursday, October 23rd, Thursday, November 20th, Thursday, January 22nd, and Thursday, February 19th. Please put those on your calendar. We will be available to help. Alrighty, now we're gonna open it up for questions.
I think we were able to address all of the ones that got added to the chat during the presentation. But if you have a follow-up question about that, or if you have a question that you've been saving to the end, feel free to put those in the chat, and then I'll moderate which questions we're answering while Savannah and Sicily share their thoughts.
I did want to piggyback. Julian, you, excuse me, asked a question. If they do not have a social security number, they should not fill out the FAFSA, or they should. So oftentimes we run into or encounter eligible non-citizens. And so some students do fall under that category. A lot of our eligible non-citizens may or may not have a social security number, in which case they could have an alien registration number that would go through Homeland Security to be verified. And so if they do not have a social security number, they would again check that box as they're creating their account that they don't have a social. They would walk through a verification of identity process. As long as they can verify that information, they would go ahead and continue to create their FSA ID. In the process, if they are an eligible non-citizen, it is going to ask them for their alien registration number. So if that's what they are utilizing, it'll be important for them to have that. Oftentimes they can find that on like their green card or some of like their I-94 paperwork. Those can kind of get into a little bit trickier waters or muddier waters. And so if you have any questions or if you're working with a student that's an eligible non-citizen or doesn't have a social, certainly reach out to the school and we would be happy to assist with that process.
So we have a question about the student aid index. It is still called the student aid index, but I'm struggling to remember, so maybe Savannah or Cicely remember, whether it can still be a negative number for 2026 to 2027. I remember the different conversations about whether to continue letting it go down to negative 1500 or to make the lowest SAIB 0, but I can't remember where things landed. I'm happy to look into that while our presenters answer the next question that just came up. But in case either of them happen to know, any thoughts?
I am
Thought
looking
it
it up
stayed
as
the
we
same.
speak.
Yeah, I thought it stayed the same, but could be wrong.
Yes, so the student aid index for 26-27 with the lowest possible SEI will still be up to negative 1500. So to answer that question, yes, it can still be a negative number. 1500 is going to be the highest negative. And then Jillian, will you send out Zoom links for the FAFSA help nights? Yes, we will be sending those out. I'm not sure when Ginger and I will get that done, but we will definitely get it done as soon as possible because we certainly want as many parents and students to be able to join us.
I was going to add, unlike our virtual training series where each training has its own Zoom link, so the next session we're doing on scholarships will have its own Zoom link and passcode. The virtual help nights are going to be the same link or the same QR code, whether you're attending the first, second, third, or fourth one. But that information will be sent out and it'll be available on our KASFAA website as well.
And then David asked if is there a cheat sheet or a guide that shows all the eligible non-citizen designations, different types of visas, etc. David, to answer your question, there's no like formal guide or cheat sheet. However, there is a lot of super helpful information on the FSA or Federal Student Aid website that will really do a great job of breaking down like the categories of eligible non-citizens, required documentation, who is and is not eligible for federal student aid. And then it'll also kind of delve for some of those students possibly into maybe some state and institutional aid options. There's a search on FSA, and we can certainly maybe work on sending you some information directly if you want pop your email down there. Like directly to where you can find that information on the website. Because again, I know those waters can be a little muddy sometimes. But yeah, federal student aid or studentaid.gov is going to be a great place to go for some additional guidelines and information.
In response to the question about assets, the text below the question says that the information for family-owned businesses with 100 or fewer employees, and farms where the family resides, and the fishing business question, that's smaller text below where the question is asked. And then answer the question that's coming out the Zoom FAFSA nights. We'll have people from KASFAA volunteers from across our state. They'll each be in individual breakout rooms. And as students and contributors join the Zoom call, we individually assign them. So if everyone who's volunteered for that night is already assisting someone, those students or contributors will wait in the waiting room until we have the privacy to add them to the meeting and then assign them to a breakout room. Important distinction, it is not an information night. Uh, Sometimes we have folks join and they say, "Oh, well, I actually can't fill out the FAFSA right now. I thought I would just like listen in the background while I do the thing that I'm required to do." So this recording will be available on KASFA's YouTube channel, as well as the recording from last year. Now, there were only a few changes between then and now, but know that when we do these, the slides and the recording will be uploaded to the KASFA website so people can access them. Even though this content was tailored towards folks who are assisting people fill out the FAFSA, I know students who have filled out the FAFSA have found it a helpful guide as well. So if we can help reduce the amount of challenges people are having getting their financial aid information, we want to help do that, whether it's our lovely audience here today or directly working with students and families.
David, thank you for sending your email. If you'll give me a little bit after the presentation is over, I will certainly send you some information in regards to eligible non-citizens, so you have that on hand.
And I realize people are logging off. So if you have any additional questions, feel free to let us know. Otherwise, we're happy to give you a little bit of your morning back. Thank you so much for tuning in today. We appreciate all the work you do to help students make that transition from their current experience, maybe as high school seniors, maybe as people who are taking a break from school for a little bit, and then making that transition into whatever comes next. And when it comes to the financial aid side of things, we surely appreciate the help that you provide. Thanks again. And like I said, we'll hang out for a few more minutes in case any other questions come up, but hope you have a great rest of your Tuesday. And many thanks to Sicily and Savannah for being our presenters. So appreciate the positive messages, letting us know this information was helpful. We do our best, and we're glad that it's beneficial.